They say silence in the woods means something's watching you. I used to think that was just backwoods folklore, something people said to scare city folk. But the moment I turned off the main road and onto that gravel drive, long and narrow, snaking between towering pines, I swear the trees held their breath, like they knew something I didn't. It had rained the night before. Mud sprayed up around the tires of my rusted pickup, and the air smelled like damp earth and rotting leaves. The GPS lost signal 20 minutes back, and even the radio fizzled into static. I hadn't seen another soul since I passed an old gas station with boarded windows and a hand-painted sign that read, "Turn back if you're smart." I should have listened. When Magnolia Hollow finally appeared, it rose out of the mist like a memory you weren't sure was real. A wide, white estate house with tall columns and shuttered windows. The kind you see in Civil War documentaries or faded postcard from the 1800s. It was beautiful in a way that felt wrong. Too clean, too still. Not a single bird in the trees. No wind. No insects buzzing. It just stood there, waiting. I parked near a roundabout with a dried-up fountain in the middle. A statue of a woman holding a bowl stood in the center, her face chipped, her mouth frozen in a scream. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat and looked up at the place. The main building stretched out on either side, 2 stories tall, all white wood and black shutters. The paint looked fresh, but the structure gave off the kind of age you can't scrub away, like it had lived through things it didn't talk about. The front doors creaked open before I even knocked. A man stepped out, tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked tailored, but worn at the edges. He had silver streaks in his hair and a pale, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You must be Mr. Vega," he said, in a smooth southern drawl. "Welcome to Magnolia Hollow." "Hernandez," I corrected, offering a handshake. "But yeah, that's me." He shook my hand, firm but cold, like he'd been standing in a freezer. "Samuel Accardi. I own the property. We're very glad you made it." "Thanks," I said, glancing past him. The foyer behind him was dimly lit, all dark with floors and oil paintings. A chandelier dangled above, its crystals swaying slightly, though the air was still. "No trouble finding us, I hope?" he asked. "Only lost reception halfway here. Thought I'd taken a wrong turn." He smiled wider. "If you had, you wouldn't be here." I blinked. "Sorry. Just a joke," he said lightly, turning on his heel. "Come, I'll show you to your quarters." I followed him inside. The air changed the moment I crossed the threshold. Cooler, heavier, like stepping into a different time. Accardi led me down a long hallway lined with faded portraits. No names, just old faces, all staring straight ahead. Some looked like they were about to say something, others like they already had. "Guests won't be arriving for a few more weeks," he said as we walked. "You'll have the run of the place until then. Maintenance, groundskeeping, general upkeep. You'll find it peaceful, if you follow the rules." I stopped. "Rules?" He turned to me, expression still pleasant. "All homes have them. Ours are just a bit specific." He handed me a small, leather-bound booklet. No title, just a dark stain on the corner that might have been water. Or not. "Read it tonight," he said. "Some are standard, some not so much. But I promise, they exist for a reason." My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile. "Right. Sure thing." He showed me to a modest caretaker's suite on the 2nd floor, tucked away behind a narrow door that I never would have noticed on my own. The room had a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, and a window that looked out onto the woods. "Unpack, settle in," he said. "And remember, if you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. No matter what you hear." He left before I could ask a single question. I dropped my bag on the bed, looked down at the booklet in my hand, and flipped it open. The first page was handwritten in faded ink. Caretaker Protocol. Rule 1. Never answer the door after midnight. Rule 2. Cover all mirrors on Thursdays. Rule 3. Do not feed the groundskeeper. Rule 4. If the hallway clock chimes at 3:33 a.m., walk the west wing backward, 1 full pass. Rule 5. Never use room 9. Never open room 9. Never speak to anyone who comes out of room 9. I laughed, a nervous chuckle I couldn't stop. Some weird welcome joke, I figured. At least, that's what I told myself. But when I looked up at the mirror across the room, I could have sworn it shifted. Just a little, like someone on the other side had moved. And I suddenly wasn't sure if I wanted to be alone here after all. I've always been the kind of person who finds comfort in quiet places. The less people, the better. So at first, Magnolia Hollow seemed like a dream. A strange dream, sure, but peaceful all the same. The second day on the job, I woke early. Not because I wanted to, but because something creaked down the hallway outside my room. It wasn't the sound of footsteps exactly, more like the groan of tired wood under pressure. When I opened the door, nothing was there. Just the empty hallway, bathed in a pale gray light spilling in from the stained glass window at the far end. I shook it off and went about my day. I had a checklist. Basic things like testing the generator, walking the perimeter, checking for storm damage. It was all very normal. Almost disappointingly normal. But that feeling from the night before, it clung to me like a damp shirt. I couldn't shake it. By mid-morning, I was wandering the guest wings. The air in the west wing was colder than the rest of the house, and it smelled faintly of old perfume. Not sweet perfume, either. It was the kind that clung to funeral homes. The kind that made you think of closed caskets and quiet weeping. Most of the guest rooms were locked. Icardi had told me not to bother with them unless a guest checked in, which apparently was rare during the off-season. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I tried a few doors. Some were stiff with age, others didn't budge at all. Room 9 had a thick iron padlock on it. Not just the doorknob lock, but an old-fashioned chain and bolt across the frame. It looked out of place, like someone had tried to keep something in or out. I wrote it down on my notepad, just in case. Later that afternoon, I wandered into the east garden. It was overgrown, but not wild. Like someone had trimmed just enough to keep up appearances. There was a small stone fountain in the center, dry and chipped, with moss curling around the base like green fingers. The hedges seemed to move in the corner of my eye, only slightly, but every time I turned to look, they stood perfectly still. Birds didn't sing out there. No insects buzzed. It was just me and the wind whispering between the branches. That's when I found the shed. It was tucked behind a wall of honeysuckle, barely visible. The door was crooked on its hinges, and the smell that came from inside was strong, like rust, earth, and something sour. I opened it only a crack and saw shelves lined with tools, many of them wrapped in cloth. A long shovel rested against the wall, its blade still caked with what looked like dried mud. Or maybe something else. I didn't stay long. Back inside, I remembered the manual Icardi had given me. I hadn't read it all yet, just skimmed the rules the night before. Now I sat in the main lounge, a room full of old books and heavy armchairs, and gave it a real look. The rules were on the first page, handwritten in blue ink that had smudged in places, like someone had written it in a rush or with shaking hands. Do not answer the door after midnight. Cover all mirrors on Thursdays. Do not feed the groundskeeper. At 3:33 a.m., walk the entire west hallway, backward. If you hear music playing from the ballroom, do not investigate. Never enter room 9. Do not whistle after dark. There were more. A full page of them. Some underlined, others circled. A few had little notes scribbled beside them, like serious or only if you hear it first. I didn't know what to make of it. It read like a prank, or maybe just local superstition. But something about it unsettled me deeply. It was the tone, maybe. Like whoever wrote, it wasn't trying to scare me. They were trying to warn me. I closed the book and sat there for a while, staring at the fireplace. The embers inside were long dead, but I swear I saw a flicker of movement in the soot. Something shifting, breathing. That night, I went to bed early. I locked the door, left the hallway light on, pulled the blanket up to my chin like a child. I hadn't broken any of the rules. Not yet. I used to think I was a skeptic, a realist. The kind of man who checked the locks twice but never believed in ghosts, who thought horror movies were all just noise and jump scares. But the night I forgot to cover the hallway mirror was the night something scratched back. It started quiet. I was in bed, the caretaker's quarters tucked away near the east wing, thumbing through the old caretaker's manual again, the one with the yellowed pages and the ink that bled slightly through. I must have read that list of rules a dozen times by then. Some were strange, sure, but they started to feel almost comical in their absurdity. Rule number 6. Cover all mirrors on Thursdays before sundown. I glanced at the small clock by my bed. 11:48 p.m. Thursday. Damn. I meant to cover the mirror in the hallway by the staircase. The one with the ornate brass frame and glass that always looked a little foggy, even after I cleaned it. I remember sitting there, debating. Should I get up? Was it worth it? Probably just some old superstition, I thought. Maybe the previous caretaker had some kind of OCD. I chuckled to myself, shut the manual, and lay back down. That's when I heard it. Scratch, scratch, tap. It came from the hall. I sat up in bed, my breath already short. Maybe it was the wind. Old buildings creak and groan all the time. But this wasn't a groan. This was deliberate, measured, like fingernails on glass. Scratch, tap. I got up and opened my door just a crack. The hallway was dark, save for the dull light coming through the stained glass window at the end. Everything was still. No movement. No sound. But then I saw it. The mirror. It was uncovered, of course, just as I'd left it. But it wasn't empty. I stepped out into the hallway, barefoot, the wooden floor cold beneath me. The air was thick, almost like walking through syrup. My eyes locked on the mirror's reflection. My own shape stared back, but it didn't move quite right. I lifted my hand slowly. My reflection did too. Half a beat too late. Then it smiled. I did not. My feet froze in place. That thing in the mirror. It wore my face, but it wasn't me. Its smile stretched too wide, like the muscles beneath the skin were tearing just to make it happen. Tap, tap, tap. It pressed a hand to the inside of the glass. My hand didn't move. Then its other hand came up, and it started scratching. Not at the mirror. At the inside. The sound was unmistakable. Nails on the inside of the glass, like it was trying to dig its way through. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. I didn't look away, not once, as I moved toward the linen closet. I grabbed the first thing I could, a dusty sheet, and threw it over the mirror. The scratching stopped, just like that. Silence. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own breath and the thrum of blood in my ears. Nothing moved. The hallway was still again. The mirror, under the sheet, became just another shape in the dark. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the main lobby, staring out the window at the trees, watching them sway slightly in the breeze like they were whispering secrets. In the morning, I pulled the sheet off, half expecting to see cracks in the glass, or blood, or something worse. But it was just a mirror. My reflection looked normal again. I told myself it was a dream. Stress. Lack of sleep. A trick of the light. But later that day, while sweeping the hallway, I found a small sliver of something on the floor, right in front of the mirror. A fingernail. Old. Yellowed. Too long to be human. I stared at it for a long time before brushing into the dustpan and dumping it into the fireplace. That night, I covered every damn mirror in the resort before sundown. Every single one. The fourth morning was wrapped in fog. Thick and stubborn, it clung to the windows like a living thing, refusing to let the sun break through. I remember standing in the dining hall, a chipped mug of coffee in hand, watching as the mist curled around the columns outside. It was the kind of fog that made the world feel small, like the resort was the only place left. It had been quiet since I got there. No guests, no cars, no sounds except the occasional groan of old pipes or the creak of wood shifting in the night. I was starting to feel like I was the only person alive in that whole forest. That was until the bell rang. A sharp ding, slicing through the silence like a knife. I jumped, sloshing hot coffee onto my wrist. The front desk bell. I hadn't touched it. No one should have. It already said no guests were scheduled this season. I left the mug behind and walked to the front foyer, the bell still vibrating slightly, as if someone had just stepped away. But no one was there. Then I saw it. A single suitcase sat beside the desk. Old leather, scuffed at the edges. Looked heavy. Too heavy for someone to carry without me hearing them come in. The guest book was open. There was a name. No signature. Just a name written in neat, black ink. Elise Winter, Room 5. I stared at the name for a long time. It hadn't been there the night before. I'd flipped through that book when I was bored. Page after page. Nothing but dust and empty lines. But now this. Room 5. I hadn't even unlocked that hallway yet. Icardi never mentioned her. I checked the registry calendar. Blank. I waited for her to come back into the foyer. Maybe she went to the restroom. Maybe I just missed her walking in. But the minutes dragged, and no one showed. Finally, I picked up the suitcase. It was colder than it should have been. The handle felt damp, like it had been left out in the rain. I carried it down the east wing, flipping on lights as I went. The air got colder the closer I got to room 5, and the bulbs flickered above me, buzzing like flies trapped in glass. The key slid into the lock without resistance. The room opened with a soft sigh. Inside was untouched. Bed made tight. Window shut. No footprints on the carpet. But the bathroom light was on. I set the suitcase beside the bed and knocked lightly on the bathroom door. "Miss Winter," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. "Just letting you know your bag's here. If you need anything, I'm down the hall." No answer. I waited. Still nothing. Eventually, I turned away. I didn't want to open the door. I don't know why. Just a feeling in my chest. Like a warning. Back in the lobby, Icardi was sitting by the fireplace, legs crossed, sipping tea. I hadn't even heard him come in. "She's a quiet one," he said without looking at me. "Who?" "Elise Winter." I paused. "So, you knew she was coming?" He smiled just a little. "Some guests don't make reservations in the usual way." I waited for more. He didn't offer any. "She didn't speak to me," I said. "I didn't even see her." "She doesn't like to be seen," he said. I must have stared too long, because he finally added, "Best to leave her be. Some visitors come here to forget." He sipped again. That night, I passed room 5 twice during my rounds. The door was closed, lights off, no sound. But when I leaned in close, I swear I heard soft humming. A woman's voice, sad and distant, like she was singing to herself in a dream. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. I listened, and in that soft, broken tune, I heard my brother's name, whispered like a memory I'd buried long ago. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't plan on going near room 9. It wasn't curiosity that drew me there, not first. It was the sound. It started just after 3 in the morning. I was in bed, lights off, barely drifting into sleep when I heard it. Soft, muffled crying. It wasn't loud, more like a whisper pressed against the far end of the hallway. For a second, I thought maybe it was the wind curling through the cracks in the windows. But the night air was dead still. Then the crying came again, sharper, like it was inside the building. I sat up in bed, listening. My eyes had adjusted to the dark, and everything looked just the same as before. Same shadows pooling in the corners. Same crooked coat rack near the door. But something fell off, like the air had shifted. I pulled on my sweatshirt and grabbed the flashlight. The hallway outside was empty, as always. Magnolia Hollow never felt awake at night, even though the old pipes liked to groan like they had bones. I walked slowly toward the west wing, letting the beam of light sweep ahead of me. The crying had faded, but it was still there. Faint, almost rhythmic. I followed the sound until I stood in front of room 9. The door was different from the others. Same paint, same number plate, but the handle was duller, almost gray, and it was padlocked. A thick, rusted chain wrapped through the handle and back into itself, locked up tight with a bolt that looked older than the walls. I stared at it for a long time. The crying had stopped the moment I reached the door. The silence that followed was worse. Out of impulse, or maybe a bad decision, I crouched and looked through the keyhole. I expected darkness, maybe the edge of a bed or a desk. What I saw chilled every part of me. The room wasn't empty. I could make out a shape. It was sitting cross-legged on the floor, motionless. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, or even if it was alive. Just a shadow with limbs, hunched like it had been sitting there for years. It didn't move, didn't blink, but I swear it was looking right back at me. Then it whispered. The voice came through the keyhole like a sigh inside my ear. "Don't forget the mirrors." I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, flickering as it spun. I picked it up, heart thumping hard, and pointed it back at the door. Silence. No voice. No crying. Nothing. I should have turned around right then, gone back to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and pretended none of it happened. But my feet didn't move. My hand, against my better judgment, reached out and touched the door. It was warm. I backed away, slow and careful. That door, room 9, it wasn't just locked. It was sealed. Sealed for a reason. And someone or something was still in there. The next morning, I asked Icardi about it. He was sipping tea on the porch, dressed in white as always, smiling like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. "Room 9, he repeated, voice calm. "Best you keep away from that one, Mr. Vega. Some doors stay closed for everyone's good." I wanted to press him, ask who was in there, or what that thing was. But he just kept sipping his tea and humming an old tune I didn't recognize. I walked away with more questions than answers. And that night, when I walked past room 9 again, I kept my eyes forward and didn't look at the keyhole. But I could still feel it watching me. And I knew whatever was inside hadn't stopped whispering. Not really. I woke up to the sound of something dragging across the wooden floor. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. You know the kind, where everything feels too close and too quiet, and your body won't move no matter how much your brain screams. But when I sat up, the dragging sound was still there, slow and heavy, like a thick rope being pulled through sand. The clock on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. The room was pitch dark except for a faint blue light spilling in through the hallway cracks under the door. I slid out of bed and pulled on my hoodie, telling myself it was probably wind, or maybe a tree branch brushing against the side of the resort. But I knew better. This place didn't do normal noises. I grabbed the flashlight from my drawer and crept out of the room. The hallway was colder than it should have been. I could see my breath in the air. The dragging sound had stopped now, but there were long streaks on the floor, thin, wet trails leading down the corridor and turning left toward the back door. I followed them. The wooden floor creaked under my feet, echoing into the darkness behind me. Something about the night made everything feel stretched, like time was walking beside me instead of passing me by. I didn't know what I was expecting when I pushed open the back door and stepped into the misty garden, but I wasn't expecting him. The groundskeeper. He was crouched near the fountain, his back turned to me, hunched over something I couldn't see. His clothes were loose, sagging off his body like they didn't belong to him. His arms were long, too long. They hung low to the ground, fingers twitching against the stones. I didn't know we had a groundskeeper. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "You all right?" He didn't respond, just made a sound, a dry clicking noise with his tongue, like a metronome gone wrong. I took a step forward, shining my flashlight toward him. That's when I saw it. He was eating something, raw, pale, wet. It looked like a bird, maybe or a squirrel. Hard to tell. The bone snapped too loud. He froze mid-bite when the light hit him, and slowly, painfully, turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wide and glassy, like marble soaked in milk. His mouth hung open, and something long and dark slipped back into his throat. I stepped back. I didn't mean to interrupt. He stood up, if you can call it standing. His joints cracked like dead twigs as he rose. He was taller than me by a good foot, and I'm no small guy. His face twitched like he was trying to smile, but didn't quite remember how. "You fed me," he said. His voice was deep, but broken, like it had been used the wrong way for too long. "No," I said quickly, heart hammering in my chest. "I didn't. That wasn't me." His eyes narrowed. He took a step toward me. "I didn't feed you," I repeated, louder this time. "You found that thing on your own." He paused, then tilted his head like a confused animal. Slowly, he turned back toward the fountain and crouched again, resuming his meal. I backed away, careful not to make any sudden noise, and ran back inside the house. When I slammed the door behind me, the old wood moaned in protest. I locked the deadbolt and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. My flashlight had dropped somewhere in the garden, but I wasn't going back for it. Not now. When I got to my room, the caretaker's manual was sitting open on my bed. I didn't leave it that way. I hadn't touched it since I stuffed it into the drawer 3 days ago. One line was circled in red ink now. "Do not feed the groundskeeper." And beneath it, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Even scraps can bring him back." I hadn't meant to go down there. Not really. It's not that I was scared. No, I'd made peace with the strange things happening around me. It's just that I wasn't supposed to go poking around where I wasn't meant to. I knew that. The rules had been clear enough. Still, curiosity has a way of gnawing at you, especially when you're stuck in a place like Magnolia Hollow. It was late in the afternoon when I found it. Or maybe I should say, when it found me. I'd been walking the perimeter of the resort, checking the pipes, making sure everything was in order, when I noticed something I hadn't before. A wooden door in the corner of the maintenance room, hidden behind a stack of old chairs and boxes of cleaning supplies. It was so out of place that I'd passed it 100 times without even seeing it. But today it stood out like an open wound. The door was small, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. It was old, but the wood didn't look like it had rotted with age. It almost seemed new, untouched. A heavy iron key was sticking out of the lock, half turned, as if someone had been about to close it when they were interrupted. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge, so I grabbed the key. The lock clicked open with a sound that made my skin crawl. I should have turned around. I should have locked the door and walked away, but I didn't. I stepped inside. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, like they were long and used. A stale smell rose from below, thick and musty, like something ancient had been buried there and forgotten. The air felt heavy, as if the room below was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. It didn't take long for my eyes to adjust. The basement wasn't much, just a narrow stone corridor stretching ahead. A low, flickering light hung from a rusted fixture on the ceiling, casting shadows that twisted unnaturally. I followed the hallway, my boots scraping against the stone floor, the smell of mildew growing stronger with each step. At the far end of the corridor, there was a small wooden door. It looked the same as the one above, old, unremarkable, but something about it felt different, almost like it had been waiting for me. I reached for the door, my fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't locked. The moment I pushed it open, the air changed. The temperature dropped, and the stale smell of rot filled my lungs. I stepped into the room, and immediately my feet sank a little into the floor, as if the ground itself had softened over time. What I saw next made my blood run cold. The room was a mess, filled with old furniture and piles of discarded items. But it wasn't the clutter that made my heart race. No, it was the walls. They were covered with strange, faded symbols, etched into the wood, drawn in charcoal, scratched deep into the plaster. They looked old, but they weren't ancient. Not in the way the house felt, at least. These symbols were fresh, recently carved. I took a hesitant step forward, my eyes drawn to a corner of the room. There, half hidden behind a stack of rotting crates, was a small shelf. It was filled with old journals, yellowed papers, and other forgotten relics. I couldn't help myself. I picked one up, its leather cover worn and cracked. The pages inside were brittle, but legible. The handwriting was neat, but frantic, like the person who had written it was in a hurry, or running out of time. The entries were strange, even for this place. They spoke of rituals, of bargains made with things that were not quite human, of sacrifices to keep something at bay. The name that kept appearing was the Hollow, the land, the house, the entire place. My head throbbed as I read more, each word dragging me deeper into the madness of it all. The last entry was the most chilling. The house has begun to remember. We must follow the rules. If we do not, they will come. And this time, they will take what is theirs. I put the journal down, my fingers shaking. I knew, deep down, that whatever they were, whatever Cardi had warned me about, they were real. And they were here. A noise behind me snapped me out of my thoughts. A door creaked open, and I turned sharply. But there was nothing there, just the dim, flickering light. I took a step back toward the stairs, but before I could turn, I felt it. Something watching me. Something cold, like an invisible weight pressing against my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. My footsteps echoed down the hallway as I scrambled back up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. As I stood there, trying to steady my breathing, I realized something else. The basement door had closed on its own, and when I turned to look at the rest of the room, there was a new symbol on the wall, freshly carved. A warning. And the rules? They were no longer optional. I had always been a stickler for routines. It was one of the reasons I came to Magnolia Hollow in the first place. The promise of isolation, simplicity, and quiet. I could handle the silence. I was good at it. But tonight, the silence felt different. It felt too thick, like the air itself was waiting for something. It started as a whisper, a murmur on the edge of my hearing. I sat in the caretaker's quarters, reading a book I had found in the lobby, something about local folklore and the strange history of the resort. The kind of thing that you'd laugh at if you weren't surrounded by so much oddness. My eyes kept straying to the window, though, watching the pale light from the crescent moon stretch across the grounds. I tried to ignore it, tried to lose myself in the pages, but the whisper came again. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe an old house settling. But it wasn't. I could hear it clearer now, a soft, insistent tapping. Light, rhythmic, like someone knocking gently at the door. I froze. The clock on the wall read 12:01 a.m. I tried to shake off the growing sense of dread. I knew the rules. I'd read them over and over. Never answer the door after midnight. But I had ignored most of the rules before, hadn't I? So what harm could it possibly do now? The knock came again. Louder. Persistent. I stood up, walking towards the door, my mind swirling with thoughts I couldn't quite capture. Who could it be? I guessed. But the place was supposed to be closed, and there hadn't been any new arrivals in weeks. I checked the peephole. Nothing. The night seemed to stretch on forever in the blackness. The sound of the knocking was the only thing that anchored me to this moment, each tap like a pulse beating in the quiet. Against all reason, I reached for the handle. The moment my hand touched it, the house seemed to exhale, a soft groan in the walls, as if it was alive, waiting. The door opened with a reluctant creak, and I was greeted by nothing but darkness. The air felt cold, colder than the night outside, and smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. I stepped out onto the porch, heart hammering in my chest. The grounds were eerily still. Not even a breeze stirred the trees. The moon was high, casting long, crooked shadows across the lawn. No one was there. No one at all. I glanced down the steps, to the left, to the right, but the empty night stared back at me. My breath fogged in the air. It was then that I heard it. A faint voice, barely audible, calling from the darkness. Help me. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the desperation in it gripped my chest like icy fingers. It was unmistakably human, a child's voice, pleading, begging. My heart skipped. I should have closed the door right then, should have followed the rule, but I didn't. I couldn't. I stepped further out, scanning the empty yard, the trees looming like silent watchers. Help me. It was coming from the woods. There, just beyond the edge of the light, between the black trunks. The voice was close now. Too close. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. Hello. I called, my voice strangely distant. My body moved before I could think. I was halfway down the steps when I heard something snap behind me. I spun around. The door had closed on its own. The sound of the latch clicking shut was too final. The warmth of the caretaker's quarters was gone, replaced by the bone-chilling cold of the night. I turned back to the woods. The voice was closer now, clearer, more insistent. Please help me. I took a hesitant step forward, then another. The trees seemed to swallow the sound of my footsteps. I kept walking, each step carrying me further from the safety of the house, further into the darkness. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. The child voice was almost sobbing now. Then I saw it. A small figure stood at the edge of the trees, barely visible in the moonlight. A child, a little girl, wearing a white dress that fluttered unnaturally in the still air. She was facing away from me, her back turned, as though waiting for me to catch up. Help me, she called again, her voice tremulous with fear. I didn't hesitate. My feet moved before I could stop them. The child was only a few steps away now, her figure faint but distinct, like a shadow in the night. Then, just as I reached out to her, she turned. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty. No pupils, just black. A blackness so deep it seemed to swallow everything around it. Her mouth opened, a gape too wide, too unnatural. And from her throat came not a cry, but a scream that was not human. It was the sound of something old, something lost, reaching for me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my throat. The ground seemed to shake beneath my feet. I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't move. The air thickened, the world around me spinning in slow motion. And then, the ground beneath my feet gave way. I fell forward, the scream still echoing in my ears. And the last thing I saw before everything went black was the child's face, twisted in an eternal, empty scream. I don't know when it started to feel like the walls were breathing. Maybe it was the first time I noticed the faint whispers coming from the back of the house. Whispers so quiet, I almost convinced myself they were just the wind. But there's no wind here. Magnolia Hollow doesn't have that kind of air. It's thick, stifling, like the house is holding its breath. I'd already broken too many rules by this point. Or maybe it was the other way around. The rules had already broken me. Each one I violated didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like something I couldn't stop, as if I was being guided or dragged down a path I didn't remember walking onto. I never signed up for any of this. The mirrors were the first to betray me. I was standing in the hallway that night, wiping down the banister like I had every other night since I arrived. The heavy, polished wood gleamed under the dim light of the hallway, but something felt wrong with the reflection. My face in the mirror. It wasn't mine. It was me, sure. Same crooked jaw, same tired eyes, but it was wrong. My reflection was smiling. Not just a quick twitch of the lips, but a wide, unnatural grin. I froze, staring at it, but the smile didn't disappear. It only grew wider, more twisted. I jerked my head away from the mirror, heart hammering, but the reflection didn't follow. It stayed in place, grinning, watching. I didn't know if I was still looking at myself anymore, or if I was staring at something else, something that had taken my shape and was now mocking me. That feeling of being watched, of being known, sank deep into my gut. It wasn't just the mirror now. It was the house itself. It knew me. I didn't want to go back to that hallway, but I had no choice. There were other rooms to tend to, other places to keep. The list of chores in the manual had become a constant presence, always hovering over me. But this time, I couldn't shake the thought that I wasn't alone in the house. I had been hearing things, soft footsteps behind me, just out of sight like someone was walking where they shouldn't be. At first, I chalked it up to nerves, to stress. But the longer I stayed, the more real it felt. That night, after I had finished cleaning the guest rooms and set the dinner trays in the dining room, I noticed the hallway had changed. The floorboards creaked in a different rhythm, like they were in a new pattern. I stepped forward cautiously, my boots tapping too loudly on the wooden floor. The hallway seemed longer. I looked behind me, and the door to the stairwell had disappeared. There was just a stretch of empty space where the door should have been. No door, no stairwell. I stepped forward again, my pulse quickening, and the hallway shifted. The walls closed in around me like the house was contracting, pushing the space tighter, like it wanted to swallow me whole. The air felt thick, heavy, and each breath I took felt wrong. I looked back to the spot where the stairwell had been, and it was there again, like it had never left. But I hadn't seen it open. I didn't know where I was anymore. That's when the others started to appear. They weren't exactly people, at least not like I remember people. It was like I was seeing them through a fog, their features twisted, faces too pale or too dark, as if they were caught between the past and the present, between the real world and whatever world I had stumbled into. They flickered at the edges of my vision, moving just out of focus, and when I turned to look, they were gone. But the feeling of them lingered, like they were just behind me, or inside me, breathing in the same air. It happened again in the parlor room. The fire was barely a whisper of smoke, its embers crackling quietly in the hearth. I was sitting in the chair by the window, hands trembling, when I saw a woman standing across the room. At first, I thought she was just another guest, lost in the haze of my mind. But then I saw her more clearly. Her face was wrong. Her eyes were wide and vacant, as though she hadn't seen anything real in years. She was looking directly at me, but there was no recognition in her gaze. I stood, my legs heavy, and the moment I took a step, she vanished. I shouldn't have moved. The second I did, everything in the room twisted. The curtains fluttered unnaturally, the air grew cold, and a sharp screech echoed from somewhere deep within the house, like a door slamming open that shouldn't have been opened. I ran. I didn't even know where I was going, but my feet carried me, and my heart was pounding in my chest, beating a rhythm I couldn't keep up with. I don't know how long I was running. I couldn't tell the time. It could have been minutes, hours, or days. The house was alive in a way I couldn't explain. The hallways stretched and shrank, twisting in impossible ways. When I thought I was near the exit, I was back where I started, back in the same hallway, facing the same door, staring into the same mirror. I screamed, and the house screamed back. I tried to think clearly, to force my mind to grasp onto something solid, but all I could feel was the house closing in, suffocating me. It wasn't just the mirrors anymore. It was everything. The walls, the floors, the air. Everything was part of the same thing, the same nightmare. A part of the house, a part of the thing that lived here. I stumbled into the kitchen, desperate to find something, anything, that would make sense of what was happening. But the kitchen was empty. The fridge, the counters, the stove, it was all wrong. Like the house had pulled all the food away, leaving only the bones of it behind. And then, I heard it again, the whispering. Soft at first, like a far-off breeze, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it filled my ears. It was the rules. The same rules I had read in the Caretaker's manual. The same ones I'd been ignoring, breaking, laughing at. But they weren't just words anymore. They were a chant, a command, a demand. You were never meant to leave. The walls shuddered. The floor buckled. And everything that had once been real, my job, my name, my life, began to crumble, piece by piece, into the hollow dark. I had stopped running. My legs were stiff, frozen in place, and my breath caught in my throat as I stood in the darkened hallway. The house seemed to be watching me, every creaking floorboard and whispered rustle making the shadows pulse with something alive, something hungry. It wasn't just the silence of the place that unnerved me. It was the feeling that it was never truly silent at all. Icardi's voice was soft behind me, like a breath against my ear, though I knew I hadn't heard him approach. "I told you," he said. "The house keeps note of those who defy the rules." I spun around to face him, my heartbeat thumping so loud I thought he must hear it. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was a hint of something deeper, something ancient in the way he looked at me. I thought I saw something flicker behind his gaze, a shadow within a shadow. I didn't break the rules. I whispered, more to myself than to him. I didn't know. Icardi chuckled, the sound low and hollow, like it came from somewhere far beyond this world. "You didn't know? That's the problem, Hernandez." His gaze softened, almost kindly, as if he were explaining something to a child. "You didn't know, and now the house knows you." A chill ran down my spine, deeper than any draft I had ever felt in these old walls. It was like his words weren't just spoken, they were felt, crawling under my skin, settling inside me, twisting my insides. I had been afraid of the house for days, but now I realized it wasn't just the house. It was him. He was the one holding the door open for whatever it was that waited in the dark. "You've been chosen, Hernandez. The house, it needs something from you," he said, taking a step closer. His footsteps barely made a sound. "You've already given so much without even realizing." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "What are you talking about?" I managed to choke out, though it felt pointless, asking questions when everything inside me screamed that I already knew the answer. Icardi smiled, a slow, cruel curl of his lips. "You think you're the caretaker, but you've been cared for all along. This place, it feeds on the broken, on the ones who are lost, who can no longer tell the difference between waking and dreaming. It has been feeding off your grief, your guilt." I stumbled backward, the walls of the hall suddenly feeling too close, like they were closing in on me. "No," I gasped. That's not possible. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of it." "You didn't ask for it," he repeated, voice soft, almost pitying. "But you're here, Hernandez. That's all that matters." His eyes darkened. "And now you're mine. And soon, you'll belong to the house as well." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as ash. I turned, my body moving on its own as I tried to flee, to break free of the nightmare I was stuck in. But the house was no longer just a place. It was alive, its every crack and creak now a reminder that I could never escape. The walls felt like they were pressing against me, pushing, suffocating. "You're not going anywhere." Icardi's voice echoed from all directions, as if the walls themselves had begun to speak. "Not until I've shown you the truth." I looked up, gasping for air as I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker in the corner of my vision, a shadow that didn't belong in the dark. But then it stepped forward, dragging itself from the cracks, crawling out of the floorboards. I saw it for what it truly was, a body, or something that had once been a body. Its skin was stretched thin, its eyes hollow pits, its mouth stretched into a permanent scream, but no sound came from it. Just a weight, like the air had thickened to the point of suffocation. The thing, the creature, was just standing there, staring at me. And then it moved. Slowly, with unnatural grace, it reached for me. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. It was like a pull like gravity itself had bent, and I was caught in its orbit. My body refused to move, frozen by fear, or maybe by something else. Something worse. Icardi stepped forward, placing a hand on the creature's shoulder. "This is what happens when the rules are broken," he said calmly, like he was talking about a weather forecast. This is what the house demands. I was shaking, unable to move, caught between the man in front of me and the thing that lurked behind him. No, please, I whispered. I didn't mean it. I didn't break the rules on purpose. Oh, but you did, Icardi replied softly, his fingers trailing down the creature's spine as though it were a beloved pet. And now you'll pay the price. He turned his gaze back to me. It's too late for you, Hernandez. There's no going back. I reached for something, anything, but my hand were trembling so violently that I could barely hold on to myself. The room seemed to shift, and then there was the sound of a door creaking open, a door I didn't remember seeing before. The smell of mildew and something decayed wafted in, and I knew, somehow, that this was the doorway I'd been avoiding since the day I arrived. The creature took a step toward me. I had no choice. I could either face it, or I could face what Icardi had waiting for me behind the door. I didn't have time to think. I turned and ran. But the house was already one step ahead of me. I knew it was too late when the walls began to scream. Not with sound, nothing that loud, nothing you could really hear. But the air hummed, like a wire under pressure. It vibrated through the bones, making everything feel just a little too tight. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. And so was I. I stood frozen in the dark hallway, my palms sweating against the pages of the journal I'd found hidden in the basement. The ritual, the one that could, maybe, undo the thing that had been gnawing at this place for centuries. It was messy, barely legible in parts, but the meaning was clear. It said the boundary could be severed. It said I could close the door if I followed it right. But as I read the instructions again, a part of me didn't want to believe it. I had seen too much already, more than I could ever explain. The shadows in the mirrors, the whispers in the walls, the way the resort bent and twisted itself like a house of cards held together by dread. The idea of tearing it all down, letting it all end. It felt like daring to cut the string of a puppet that could very well turn around and rip my throat out. I turned the pages with a shaky hand, and then my stomach sank. There it was, the line that had been smudged by something, maybe ink, maybe blood, and now it was clear. The last step of the ritual, walk backwards at 3:33 a.m. through the heart of the house, and undo the bond by the sixth doorway. Simple. Horrifyingly simple. I didn't know what the sixth doorway was. I didn't even know what that bond was. But there was no turning back now. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after what I had felt when Icardi spoke his cryptic words. After everything he'd kept from me. His calm, too calm, warning. He knew. He knew this would happen. He was waiting for it. I didn't know if I was ready to face whatever that thing was beneath this house. But I knew if I didn't try, if I didn't do something, the resort was going to swallow me whole. And maybe it would take the rest of the world with it. Or maybe that was just what Icardi wanted. I glanced at the old clock in the hallway. 3:22 a.m. 3 minutes. I felt my heart racing. A trickle of sweat slid down my spine as I stood up straight. The ritual needed focus. No hesitation. Not now. I stepped into the hallway, where the lights flickered like dying fireflies. The air was thick, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. Each step felt heavier. Each step, more deliberate. The first door I passed, the one at the end of the hall, trembled as I got near it. The handle jiggled on its own. I swallowed hard and kept walking, trying not to look at it, not to listen to the faint scraping sound that came from behind it. I glanced at my watch. 3:30 a.m. I didn't dare breathe too loud. I was counting down in my head, like I was running from something faster than I could outrun. The walls pulsed. 3 minutes until everything changed. I reached the first corner. I had to turn left. This was where the ritual started to make sense, or where it would break apart. I had to move backwards, they said. Move backwards, and everything would realign. But how could I trust that? How could I trust any of it? I turned around and started walking backwards. At first, nothing felt different. The floor creaked under my boots. The usual chill was there, tugging at the nape of my neck. But then, the shadows grew thicker, like they were rising from the floor itself. They reached toward me, longer and darker than they should have been. I forced myself to keep moving. The second doorway came into view. I couldn't remember seeing it earlier. The wood was warped. The knob was bent, as if someone had tried to open it from the inside for too long. There was a faint smell of decay, leaking from the cracks. I didn't dare stop to investigate. I kept walking, forcing my eyes forward, ignoring the whisper in my ear. The third door there. This one I had seen earlier in the night, but it was different now. Its frame seemed to ripple, like a mirage. I felt my heart stutter in my chest. I couldn't make sense of it. Was this the place where it all started? No. No time for that. I needed to focus. I counted the doors in my head, knowing there was only one more to go. The sixth. The one I was looking for. As I stepped into the fourth room, the door slammed shut behind me. The air turned dense, almost suffocating. I felt the pressure building all around me. My breath was shallow. The walls were closing in. The shadows were crawling across the floor like insects. Every corner of the room seemed to stretch out further than it should. Keep moving, I told myself. Get to the sixth doorway. My feet felt like lead. The ritual was supposed to work. It had to. I could see the final door up ahead, the one that should have been the last. But it wasn't. I could feel the pull of something behind me, something I couldn't look at, couldn't understand. The sixth doorway, it wasn't just a door. It was a decision, a choice. I turned the corner. The doorway was bigger now, looming like a mountain. It stretched out into nothingness, beyond the limits of this place. I stepped forward, but I couldn't feel the floor beneath me. I wasn't sure if I was standing anymore. The darkness was endless, consuming me. And I heard a voice. A whisper, low and cold. You're too late. I turned to see who had said it, but all I saw was blackness. Then, before I could react, the room exploded with noise. The air around me snapped and crackled like burning paper, and the world folded in on itself. I stumbled backwards. The door in front of me splintered apart. The ritual wasn't over. It had just begun. I don't remember the exact moment I ran. I don't even remember the first time the walls began to shake and the floors trembled beneath my feet. It was all a blur, a twisted mess of sound and sensation that bled together like some terrible nightmare. The only thing I knew for sure was that I needed to get out. Get away from this place before whatever haunted it could drag me back into whatever dark hole it called home. The air felt thick, heavier than it had ever been inside Magnolia Hollow. My breath came in quick gasps, lungs burning as I stumbled through the hallway. It was no longer a hallway. It was something else entirely. The walls were warping, twisting, like the very bones of the house were stretching and breaking, trying to escape their own skin. I couldn't see straight. The lights flickered, buzzing like angry bees, casting shadows that crept along the edges of the room, reaching out for me. The door. I had to reach the door. It felt like miles away, though I knew it was just a few steps down the hall. I tried to focus on it, try to focus on anything that would keep me moving forward, but everything kept shifting, slipping in and out of my vision. One minute I was looking at the door, the next I was staring at a mirror that hadn't been there a second ago. I froze. My reflection was not mine. I stared at the man in the mirror, or what was supposed to be a man. His face was wrong, stretched too wide, mouth too open. His eyes were hollow, like he'd been drained of everything human. I could feel his gaze on me, crawling over my skin like ice. I backed away, but the reflection didn't follow. It stayed there, watching me with those empty eyes, its mouth twitching into a smile that made my stomach churn. I turned on my heel and ran, the sound of my footsteps pounding against the floor, the echo bouncing off the walls. I didn't know where I was going anymore, only that I had to get out. The hallway twisted in front of me, bending like a snake in the grass, doors appearing and disappearing like some cruel trick. My head spun with every turn. I couldn't tell which way was up anymore. Then, suddenly I saw the exit. The grand front doors. They were wide open, the outside world just beyond them. It felt like a beacon in the dark, pulling me in, whispering promises of freedom. But as I ran toward them, I heard it. A voice, low and soft, curling through the air like smoke. It was a voice I knew too well. Hernandez. Icardi said, his voice like honey, smooth and slick. You really think you can escape? I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. But the closer I got to the door, the further it seemed to move. The space between us stretched, the room growing impossibly large. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat a deafening drum. The door was still there, just ahead, but it felt unreachable now. It was like the world itself was mocking me, pulling me back with every step I took. Behind me, I could hear Icardi's footsteps. He was moving toward me, not in a hurry, but with purpose. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him closing in, feel the weight of his presence like a shadow pressing in from all sides. "You've broken the rules, Hernandez," he called, his voice echoing off the walls. "You've disturbed the balance. There's no leaving now." I didn't know what he meant, but I didn't care. I couldn't think about it. I just had to get out. I pushed harder, the door almost within my reach. But something grabbed my ankle. A hand. A cold, skeletal grip that yanked me off my feet, pulling me back. I screamed, my hands scraping against the floor as I tried to push myself forward. But it was no use. The pull was too strong. The darkness beneath me seemed to open wide, swallowing me whole. I kicked, punched, and finally, with one last desperate movement, I pulled myself free. I was up again, running, crawling, anything to put distance between me and whatever was behind me. The door was still there, and now I was closer than ever. I reached the door, throwing it open with everything I had. The night air hit me like a slap across the face, cool and real. I stepped into it, breathing it in, tasting freedom on my tongue. But the ground beneath me wasn't solid. I stumbled, tripped, and fell. The forest stretched out before me, trees thick with shadows. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain shooting up my legs, my body moving on instinct. There was no time to think, no time to process what had just happened. I just had to get away. I had to get out. I ran. The woods were thick and wild, the branches clawing at my clothes, the underbrush tripping me up as I stumbled through the dark. I didn't know how long I ran, minutes, hours. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart in my chest, the rustle of leaves underfoot. I didn't stop, not once, even as the sounds of the forest seemed to grow louder, more unnatural. There was something following me. I knew it. I could feel it in the air, in the ground, in the way the trees bent toward me. But no matter how much I ran, no matter how fast I pushed myself, I couldn't escape it. The place, it wouldn't let me go. The deeper I ran, the more lost I felt. Finally, I collapsed, my body giving out under the strain. I couldn't go on. Not anymore. I lay there, breathing heavily, eyes closed, just trying to hold on to the little shred of sanity I had left. The world around me was silent, too silent, like everything had stopped moving. And then, from somewhere far away, I heard a sound, a distant thud like a door slamming shut. I opened my eyes and looked around. Magnolia Hollow wasn't there. The resort was gone. There was nothing but empty space, the twisted, empty forest. I had escaped, but I wasn't free. Not really. And that thought, as I lay there gasping for air, filled me with a quiet, terrible certainty. It wasn't over. It would never be over. I woke up to a bright, clear morning that didn't feel right. The air was thick, but not with humidity or the heavy weight of the pines like I'd come to know at Magnolia Hollow. No, this felt like something had been pulled away, and in its place, there was only emptiness. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fuzz. The feeling lingered, as though the ground beneath me had been scraped clean, and I was left standing in a world that wasn't mine. I was lying on a patch of grass, surrounded by trees, but not the thick, claustrophobic woods of the resort. This was different. The trees were taller, their trunks thinner, and the light was far too bright, far too still. I could see the distant outline of a road, and somewhere far off, the faint hum of traffic, but no Magnolia Hollow. I sat up, heart pounding, the sudden rush of confusion pushing all the air out of my lungs. My mind scrambled to remember what had happened, how I had ended up here, but there was nothing. I couldn't remember when I'd left the resort, or if I had. Had I even escaped? The memory was like smoke, drifting just out of reach. I staggered to my feet, disoriented, and looked around. I was in a field, bare, flat land, with a few scattered trees. The closest one was twisted, gnarled, and bare, like it had seen too many years and too many storms. But it didn't feel like a storm had passed here. It didn't feel like time had passed at all. I looked down at my clothes, expecting to see the same worn-out uniform I'd been wearing the night before, the one with the dirt stains and sweat that had soaked through. But instead, my shirt was clean. My pants were crisp and neat, as if I'd just put them on for the first time. There were no scrapes on my hands, no bruises on my knees. I took a deep breath, tried to calm myself. I needed answers. I had to figure out what had happened, how I'd ended up here, and why everything felt so wrong. I started walking, my legs unsteady beneath me, like I was walking on unfamiliar ground. Every step felt too light, too deliberate. The trees around me looked like the kind of trees you'd see in a storybook, but the air tasted like dust. It didn't make sense. As I walked, I spotted a dirt road in the distance, a thin line cutting through the otherwise empty field. It was the kind of road you'd take if you were trying to escape something you didn't want to look back at, something you couldn't run away from. I moved toward it, my pace quickening. I needed to find anyone, who could tell me what the hell was going on. But as I got closer, I saw something odd. A car. A rusted, old sedan parked on the side of the road. It was a relic from another time, worn out, dirty, as if it had been there for years. A strange unease filled me as I approached. It wasn't just a car. It was the feeling that something about this place was familiar, yet completely alien. I walked around to the driver's side and peered in through the cracked window. The seat was empty, but the dashboard was covered in dust and cobwebs, as if the car hadn't been used in a long time. A faint smell of decay lingered in the air. But then, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the front seat, there was a book. A thick, leather-bound book, with a cracked cover. I could make out the faint lettering, just barely, written in gold, Caretaker's Manual. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that book. I knew it. It was the same manual I'd found at Magnolia Hollow, the one with the rules, the one that had never left my side, the one that had somehow followed me into this strange world. I opened the door, the handle groaning in protest. My fingers trembled as I picked up the book, feeling its weight in my hands. It looked older than I remembered, its edges worn, as if it had been passed through many hands. But the lettering was unmistakable. I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages. There in the center of the book was a list of rules. Never answer the door after midnight. Do not feed the groundskeeper. Cover the mirrors on Thursdays. And then a new one, written in red ink. You were never meant to leave. I stood there, paralyzed by the words. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. This was impossible. I had escaped. I had left. I had broken the rules, and somehow, I had made it out. But the book was still here, still pulling me back. It wasn't just the resort that followed me. It was the rules, the cursed weight of them, the things I had broken, the things I had done. I could hear the sound of a car approaching in the distance, its engine humming like a low growl. My heart skipped a beat as I looked toward the road. In the distance, I saw a figure, a shadow against the sun. A man I didn't recognize, but there was something about him that made my skin crawl. He was walking toward me, his gait steady, his eyes locked onto mine. I took a step back, my pulse racing. The book fell from my hands and hit the dirt with a sickening thud. And then, just as I turned to run, I heard the knock. It came from behind me. A knock at the door. The same old door that I had left behind. The one I thought I'd escaped. I froze. The knock echoed in the stillness of the field, louder than anything else. At 12 a.m., I didn't need to turn around and know that the door was waiting for me. I was never meant to leave. I woke up that morning with the faintest sense of wrongness, like something I couldn't shake had crept into my skin overnight. It wasn't a dream, but it felt like the memory of a dream I couldn't quite remember. The woods, the house, Magnolia Hollow was gone. I was gone. Or maybe I had never really left. The thick pine trees surrounding me now, the gas station attendant who gave me that odd look, all of it was too real, too sharp to be part of the blur I had come from. I checked into a small motel, just off the highway, the kind you forget even exists once you leave. It smelled like stale cigarettes and cleaning chemicals, the kind of scent you can never really wash out. The sun was already dipping behind the hills as I unlocked the door to my room. A quiet, low hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above my head. The room was normal, too normal. Everything looked exactly how it was supposed to, almost too perfect. The faded curtains hanging from the window, the bed with its thin blanket. Nothing in here made me feel at ease, not after everything that had happened. I put my bag down on the wooden nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. My hand was shaking slightly, so I grabbed the remote and flicked on the TV, but it was just static. I turned it off quickly, pressing my hands against my face, try to ground myself. Then, as I stood up, something caught my eye. A faint shape resting on the nightstand, something out of place. I hadn't brought it with me. The edges of the small book were worn, the cover creased and yellowed with age. I picked it up, heart racing in my chest. The Caretaker's manual. I thought I had left it behind. I thought I had burned it, thrown it into the ashes of Magnolia Hollow. But there it was, its weight familiar in my hands. I stared at the worn cover, the title smeared and faded, The Rules of Magnolia Hollow. My fingers trembled as I flipped it open, and sure enough, there they were, the rules, written in neat, looping handwriting. It looked so much like Accardi's handwriting, but something wasn't right. There were new lines, new rules, etched in fresh ink, darker and thicker than the rest. I read the first rule, my stomach sinking. Do not touch the mirrors after midnight. They are watching. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced over at the mirror beside the bed, its reflection showing nothing but empty air. It looked like a simple piece of glass, but I knew better now. There were things behind that glass. I moved my hand to turn the page, but my fingers froze. Another rule was added at the bottom of the page. Do not open the door, even if you hear someone knocking, even if you hear a voice calling your name. A chill swept over me, and I dropped the book, its pages fluttering as it hit the floor. I scrambled back, staring at it, my heart pounding in my chest. It couldn't be real. I had left. I was free. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I saw the truth. It had followed me. I stumbled back towards the door, my breath shallow, but I couldn't stop looking at the damn book. A strange urge to open it again gnawed at me, a pull I couldn't explain. Against my better judgment, I picked it back up and flipped to the last page. The final rule was written in thick, angry strokes. You were never meant to leave. My blood ran cold. I didn't even register what happened next. There was a knock on the door. One knock. Soft, gentle, but so loud in the silence. I stared at the door, my heart threatening to explode in my chest. A single, small voice inside of me told me to walk away, to ignore it, to never open the door. But my feet didn't listen. They moved on their own, like I was being pulled by invisible strings. I reached for the handle. The knocking came again, louder this time. And then, I swear I heard my name. Hernandez. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the TV. It was real. But as I turned the handle, I felt a wave of cold wash over me. Something in the room shifted, the shadows deepened, and the floor beneath me felt like it was tilting. The door cracked open slowly, and I held my breath, praying that what was waiting on the other side wouldn't be what I thought it was. But it wasn't nothing. The hallway beyond was dim, empty, except for one thing. A figure, standing still, watching me. It was hard to make out at first, like it wasn't quite there. Like it was a reflection of something that shouldn't be reflected. But then the figure stepped forward, and I saw it clearly. It was Accardi, except it wasn't. Not really. His face was different, twisted. His smile stretched too wide, his eyes too dark, like they weren't meant for this world. And in his hands, there was another book, the one I'd left behind. He raised it slowly, his grin widening. You shouldn't have left, Hernandez, he said, his voice deep, hollow. The rules will always find you. You were always meant to stay. I slammed the door shut, heart hammering in my chest. My hand shook as I turned the lock, but I knew it wouldn't matter. It never did. I backed away from the door, clutching the rulebook in my hands. The room felt smaller, tighter, the air thick with something suffocating. And just like that, the knock came again. But this time there were two, then three. And I could swear, just on the edge of my hearing, I heard my name again. Hernandez. The book in my hands fluttered. Pages turning. New rules. New laws. I was never meant to leave. I had always been part of it. Part of them. The knocking continued. Louder. Faster. And I knew, with a sick certainty, that I would never be free. I never meant to come back. I thought I was free. I convinced myself that Magnolia Hollow was a nightmare. A hallucination caused by grief and isolation. A fever dream brought on by too many long nights alone in the woods. I told myself that everything was over. The resort, the rules, Accardi, all of it was in the past. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was never over. It never would be. And now, here I am again. The room smells faintly of cedar and old wood. It's the same kind of smell that clung to the walls of Magnolia Hollow, the one that never quite left your lungs, no matter how much you try to breathe clean air. The walls are stained yellow, and there's a slight draft slipping in under the door. I sit on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling as I run them over the nightstand. I wasn't expecting to find it. Couldn't have. But there it is, resting against the lamp like it's been waiting for me. The Caretaker's manual. I know it the second I touch it. The weight, the feel of the leather. I'd seen it 100 times before, in the hollow rooms and flickering hallways. It should have been gone, burnt or buried or lost in time. But here it is, folded neatly, resting like an old friend. No, not a friend. A warden. The rules are still inside, the same ones I thought I had left behind. My name is written on the cover in ink that feels as fresh as if it had been penned just yesterday. And the last rule, it's there, in bold, in the same eerie handwriting I'd seen too many times in that cursed book. You were never meant to leave. I try to breathe, but my lungs are tight, strangled by the weight of it all. My heart races in my chest, thudding so hard it almost drowns out the sound of the clock on the wall ticking louder, as if it's mocking me. It's almost midnight. It doesn't matter. Nothing does. I can feel the darkness creeping around the edges of the room. I try to tell myself I'm imagining it. I try to remind myself that I'm safe now, that the nightmare's over. But I know better. The walls have started to hum, a low, vibrating sound that fills my ears, making the hairs on my neck stand up. There's a knock at the door. 3 short, rapid taps like fingers drumming on wood. My heart leaps into my throat, and I freeze, not daring to move. It's the same knock I heard that first night at Magnolia Hollow, when everything started to fall apart. My instincts scream at me to run, but my legs won't budge. I've learned by now that running doesn't work. The house always catches up. The knob turns. Slowly. The door creaks open, just a crack, and I see a figure standing in the dark hallway. A silhouette, too still, too perfect, as if it doesn't belong here. Come in, I hear myself whisper. I can't help it. The words slip out before I can stop them. The figure steps inside, and for a moment, I swear the air grows colder. I can feel the presence of something old, something ancient, pressing in from the edges of the room, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. But I know better than to look away. I know what happens when you do. It's Icardi. He smiles, that same soft, unsettling smile I remember all too well. His eyes are dark, almost black now, but there's something familiar in them, something that's always been there, lurking beneath the surface. I thought you'd return, he says, his voice smooth, like honey over broken glass. You always do. I want to scream, to fight, to tear this whole place apart, but the words catch in my throat. I can't move. I'm paralyzed by the weight of it all, by the weight of him. The rules were never meant to be broken, you see. He continues, his voice so gentle, almost affectionate. And once you break them, there's no going back. You were always meant to be part of this place, just like all the others before you. I can't tear my eyes away from him. His presence is suffocating, like something cold and heavy pressing down on my chest. The clock ticks louder now, louder than my thoughts. The room is growing darker. The shadows twist and stretch, curling around the edges of the walls like hungry fingers. You can't escape, Hernandez, Icardi says, his smile widening. You've always been here, and now, you'll never leave. I try to open my mouth to speak, but no sound comes out. The darkness is swallowing me whole. Another knock. The door opens wider. And then, I see them, all of them. Faces in the dark. People who shouldn't be here. People who are long gone. Faces twisted with fear, all staring at me with hollow eyes. I know the truth now. I never left. The resort, the rules, Icardi, they were never meant to let me go. I've always been a part of it. Just another cog in its twisted machinery. A caretaker, a prisoner, a part of the bargain. And no matter how far I run, it will always find me. I reach for the manual. But the pages are blank now. There are no more rules. Only silence.